Maggie, it's been a while, but we're back on the Deconstruction Zone together.
We're back. It's been too long.
It's been too long. For anyone just joining us, we just wrapped up 5 weeks on world religions. We paired it with the Wells sermon series on it, but had an opportunity to interview a myriad of different religious, either professionals or just individuals that are involved in different faiths. And it was kind of a fun journey. And I know you got to do a few of them. And so, yeah, it was fun. But now we're back.
Yeah. We had some really, really good guests on. I was super bummed that I couldn't sit in on some of those discussions because, man.
Yeah, they were fun ones. I enjoyed them. I always like getting a chance to hear other people's perspectives. And like oftentimes I think Christians don't put themselves in positions to do that. And so I found myself, I don't know if you found yourself listening like this or any of our listeners like this, but I actually often found myself agreeing with the perspectives of other people on their faith. And it made me question my own perspective on, and we talked about this a little bit at the well, like things we inherit versus things that are like true, whatever that means. That was kind of a common thing I asked myself through the course of these 5 weeks. Like, what have I inherited? What is true if there is an objective truth? And then what do we do with any or all of that? And so it was a fun journey for me.
Yeah, I listened to the podcast episode and then also your sermon about Buddhism. And I left thinking, like, am I Buddhist? Wait, like, oops, Am I accidentally a Buddhist? I didn't realize. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that would be like the biggest fear for some people, right? That like that's, I know people, when we said we were doing this series, like other people that are kind of on the periphery that have more objection with the well or just nervous about what we're doing. That was their thing. Like, well, only Christianity is true, or you're going to open up a door to lead people to sin. And so I'd just be interested. I mean, we can go into whatever our topic is for today here in a second, but I would be interested. Was that like a life-giving feeling to like off-putting? Was it value neutral when you're like listening and watching, like, oh no, I might be a Buddhist? I know you're like a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that, but like, does that feeling like hit you in a way that's like, oh, that's cool, or like, oh shit, what do I do with this?
No, I mean, I definitely thought it was cool. I have gotten to the place in my, I mean, you know this, I've gotten to the place in my like religious journey that the old me and the way I was taught as a kid was definitely that like there is one objective truth, right, and if you don't find it, then you're going to hell. And I don't believe that anymore. I don't think that's true at all. So hearing like it was more like thinking, oh cool, this like religion or walk of life that I really don't know very much about shares a lot of like my same values and like core beliefs. And so I thought that was really cool. It felt very like connecting, not really scary at all. At least for me.
Yeah,
can't speak for others.
I suspect for people, and at least the ones I've had the conversations with, in either podcast listeners who just heard the podcast or people that just were in the church or heard both, I think that was generally the sentiment that was echoed. It was like more eye-opening and life-giving than restrictive and kind of demoralizing, which is always the hope. Like, you never want to preach I never want to preach a sermon that's like restrictive and demoralizing. I'm sure some preacher does somewhere, but I don't. Maybe in more you'll appreciate what I'm going to do here. Maybe in more high control religions, that's what people do, which I think is a great segue to our topic today.
Absolutely seamless.
Yeah. So why don't you take us into what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So Danny, I've been thinking, I obviously deconstructed from evangelical Christianity a while back, but kind of as part of that journey, I found a lot of camaraderie with people that also deconstructed from Mormonism. I think that evangelical Christianity and Mormonism actually have a lot in common, and neither one of those groups really likes to admit that. I think that both, I mean, I only know it from like the evangelical Christianity side, but evangelicals do not want to be compared to Mormons. They don't like it when you do that, when you point out similarities. And obviously I don't have personal experience with Mormonism, but it seems like that is also kind of the vibe on the other side too, is that they don't really want to be lumped into the same group together.
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, I would say just my experience is that evangelicals don't want Mormons to be lumped in with anything Christian, and Mormons want to be seen as Christians. Like, did you see the thing Hegseth just put out, like with a list of like Christian denominations, and like Mormons were left off of that?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think that you could make a strong case for why that is. And I think you could also make a strong case for why that's like a power move done by the government that's trying to like consolidate and redefine specifically what Christianity, specifically evangelical Christianity, is. But I think it's interesting because I mean, I watch some of these Mormon documentaries and podcasts and stuff, and I'm like, it feels very similar to me to how I look at any fundamentalist Christian thing. They just have a different gospel in America that I don't believe to be the gospel. But like, other than that one thing and some like wacky extraterrestrial stuff that I don't also subscribe to, like I would say what I would call wacky. Don't want to be mean to anyone, but like other than that, it's like pretty similar stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And definitely, I think for me, the biggest similarities that I see are like the cultural things. So, real buttoned up, big on modesty, big on appearance,
big on patriarchy.
Big on patriarchy, heavy on the patriarchy, actually.
Mormons almost like worse than evangelical Christians in some, like, and I'm using worse in like not a value way, but like they certainly lean heavily into a patriarchal society. Like even in terms of their view of what happens when you die, it's all very much male driven, which evangelical Christianity also very much so as well.
Yeah. And what's always been kind of funny to me is that evangelical Christians, I'm going to piss some people off with this, but really talk out of evangelical Christians aren't listening to this podcast. It's fine.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Really talk out of both sides of their mouths with the patriarchy thing. I think the kind of run of the mill, regular evangelical Christians do, where they'll say like, oh, well, the Bible says that women aren't permitted to lead in church. And we believe that, like, women can't be pastors. But like, my husband doesn't like subjugate me, like they kind of will claim that men are ordained to be the head of the household, but they don't actually follow that in practice. And a lot of evangelical churches don't really follow it with their staff either. Like they'll have women on staff as, worship leaders, children's ministry teachers, women's ministry providers, like they have women in positions of leadership, but they're not preachers, they're not pastors, they're
directors,
they're teaching,
coordinators,
they're leading, they're coordinating, but they're not preaching, they're not pastoring and shepherding. So that's very like, well, I think that's a little mental gymnastics-y there. I would say that's another. But my point in bringing this up, is
I led you down a tangent.
Yes, that's okay. There's a lot of similarities, at least in the specific like flavor of evangelicalism that I grew up in, and Mormonism. And so during my deconstruction, I found a lot of camaraderie in also consuming like Mormon deconstruction podcasts. The Girls Camp podcast with Haley Rawl as the host. That's a big one that I really enjoy and listen to. And something that I have noticed that is true for myself, and I believe is also true for her, is that people who tend to deconstruct were often like kind of the most devout individuals, or at least had a history of like being really, really devoted to their faith or their church. And I'm just kind of noticing that pattern. Alyssa Grenfell is another one. She's a creator online who used to be absolutely like all in for, like, she was the Mormon girly and has since deconstructed and doesn't claim that anymore.
Okay.
And I feel like I was really similar. I was like the youth group girly. Like I was the evangelical girl. I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to church 3 times a week. I served in all these different teams. I read my Bible every day. I went to small group. I dressed modestly. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I did all the things. And it was all like truly because I was so in it to win it for the Lord. Like I was so in it to win it for the church. And so that's why I think for me, deconstruction can feel like kind of a 180, but I've noticed that pattern with a lot of people. So I just wanted to talk about, like, is there something to the level of devotion? Like, is it good to be that devoted to something?
Yeah.
Or does it kind of always lead to problems down the road? Or like, what is the line between like devotion and obsession, I guess?
Yeah, the last line is interesting, devotion versus obsession. That was kind of like what initially I was thinking about. And I have a couple of different things that pop into my mind. One being like entering the deconstruction space with this podcast like 4 years ago, whatever it was. One of my early observations was the most militant deconstructionists were the most militant evangelicals. And I think you could take that anyway, like the most devoted whatever are the most devoted deconstructionists. And I think that was a really interesting thing to me. And I think about it like this. So like I stopped drinking alcohol over 3 years ago, something like that. And it was like I wasn't like doing terrible things, and I wasn't like barfing every night, and I wasn't like beating my kids or whatever, or like turning into like some raging alcoholic. But I saw like some things of like addictive personality traits. So I was like, I should stop this. And so I took an inventory, I stopped it. But what I realized is my addictive traits did not go away. They just transferred. And so then I became really addicted to Orange Theory and then CrossFit and then a lot of like fitness things. But I could also like put it into food or other stuff. And I think about it very similar for people that deconstruct out of evangelicalism. Like what they are trying to scratch is an itch of belonging, trying to scratch an itch of answering existential questions, trying to scratch an itch of being intellectually, maybe not curious, but like have intellectual depth that like they think, so that they found it in religion. And then they're like, well, that's all bullshit. And so now it's like, it's found in being the smartest to tear it all down. And so that's an interesting part of devotion for me. Like, I think devotion is good, but I think oftentimes it does go into addiction or obsession. And that's just not healthy in either one phase. And then the other thing that you got me thinking when you said this was like, I would look at this at the well a lot. Like we get a lot of volunteers come and they're like sold out. They're like, man, I've never seen a church that does X, whatever we do, like whether it's including queer people, or I just talked to a family the other day that was like, I'm finally glad to be in a church that like we feel welcomed and like cares about like racial justice and like all of those. Like I love all those things. Like those make me really, really happy. But what I watch is like people dive all in because they think that's what's required of them, because that's what they've seen modeled, and they end up getting frustrated either because they get overworked or because we don't work them enough, because we don't often and usually, and that is sometimes the one is because we don't have a lot of those things built in of expectation. Like our language is invitation, not expectation, among other isms that we have. So I don't know, like those are things that initially like popped into my head of, one, it feels like people are going to be the same person they are regardless. They're just going to reframe what that looks like depending on their belief structure. And then often people dive in wholeheartedly because they want to be involved, but don't realize that like all the same things that could burn you out of a conservative church can still burn you out in a progressive church. Just because like our values align better doesn't mean you're not going to burn out or feel resentment or feel those things. And so those are the two things that popped into my mind. But is that kind of where you were thinking along those lines?
Yeah, definitely that first thing that you hit on, which I think we've kind of talked about this before on this podcast about like, don't become a atheist, don't go from a Christian fundamentalist to an atheist fundamentalist, or don't go from a Christian fundamentalist to like a deconstruction fundamentalist where it's like everyone has to do this is the only way, like that. For me, and kind of going back to our world religion series too, is that like I think that part of maturity and part of growth is learning that like there are things that can be true for different people, and it's not our job to like force someone to believe what we believe, even if it's what we think is right. So and there's layers to that, there's levels to that for sure. It doesn't mean that like people can just get away with like bigotry and wrongdoing because it's like, oh well, they think it's right. No, that's not what I'm saying. But like and I've seen this with other people too, in real life, who have deconstructed and then go from being like everyone should be Christian, I'm going to evangelize and win souls for the Lord, make heaven crowded, to a total opposite of that, of like, everyone should deconstruct. If you're still a Christian, that's crazy. Like, here's all that, where
Empty
it's
out
like,
heaven.
Yeah, empty out heaven. But it's like this, it's the same exact mentality and the same exact like fundamentalism of like, this is the only way, but just in different clothing or in a different package.
Yeah, I think I've said this somewhere publicly, either on this podcast or else, but I was like, if you're an asshole somewhere, you're probably going to be an asshole everywhere. Like, and so like, if you were
wherever you go, that's where you are. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, and I suspect people can change, but it's like, if you were an asshole and a fundamentalist as an evangelical, and then you deconstruct, there's a strong chance you're going to be a fundamentalist asshole as a deconstructionist or as a atheist or whatever. Like, think about like the most, and I don't want to pick on atheists, but like, and those are a lot of my friends growing up in Portland, but like the new atheist movement is like a fundamentalist atheist movement in some ways.
Very much so.
And it's, and a lot of it is Theo bros that felt like they were sold a line of like bad goods or whatever, and then they switched teams. But all of the same, and this is what we've been circling around, is like a lot of the same like characteristics and motivations and language still exists. And over time, I think it shifts a little bit, but it is interesting. And I was thinking too, like, so we have a guy at the church who came out of a pretty high control, I would call cult. He wrote like an 80-page thesis on this church he was a part of, and he sent it to me. I was getting ready to go like speak at this thing, and I got a thing on the airplane, and he sent me this like 80-page document, and I read it. And it was really, really interesting, but it was like chronicling his time, and he interviewed a lot of people, the experiences. It was like this academic paper. It was really, really interesting. Okay. But he came to the well, and they've been in and around the well. They're still involved. But I remember like they really wanted to get connected with small groups. But small groups were like the mechanism of control for this church. And so they were like, we want to do this thing, but we've never seen it modeled in a healthy way that doesn't just feel like a mechanism of control. And that's something I wonder about all the time. It's like what the obligation of the church is in regards of programming. And to bring it back to what you said, like, we talk about devotion, and oftentimes that means like devotion to programs of the institution, like more or less. I don't think a church would usually say the quiet part out loud, but isn't that what we're kind of asking people to be devoted to, is like to the institution? And I felt that tension for them, because they're like, we still love Jesus and we really like these people, but like these institutional commitments and devotions feel, even though we trust you guys, still feel icky to us because we've only seen them as a mechanism of control. And so that's something I asked myself as a pastor, like, what do we do with that? Because it begs two questions, like, can any of these things be redeemed within the system? Or is the system just that broken that it needs to be rethought?
Yeah.
Or does devotion need to be rethought, I guess?
Well, and I think it's interesting because I do really struggle with separating the system from the religion or the spirituality, I guess. We've talked about before, like, are you a Christian because you go to church, or are you a Christian because you have a personal relationship with Jesus, that type of thing. And in my background, a lot of people would contend that they're not very devoted to the system, that they really are devoted to Jesus, and they are doing what they think Jesus is asking them to do, which is, like, I don't know, hating America or hating gay people and being a Christian nationalist. And like,
certainly could never be hating America.
Not hating America. No, Jesus loves America. That's in the Bible. But so I have a really hard time with that personally, of like teasing those two things apart. Like, I wonder at what point does it become useful to separate them? You know what I mean?
Say more about that. Sorry, like you have so maybe that's where you're going. Like, you have a hard time thinking they can be, or knowing how to, or which one are you saying?
Both. I have a hard time personally mentally separating the two, the institution from the people within it, because ultimately institutions are made up of people. And so it's kind of like, just to compare it to something, it's kind of like a few bad apples thing of like when we talk about police corruption and police brutality,
Yeah.
saying like, oh, well, most cops are really good. It's just a few bad apples. But the saying is a few bad apples spoil the bunch. And that completely ignores the fact that like our modern policing system was based off of slave catching and a whole, centuries of racial history that I don't have the degrees to speak on with authority. But
JT could. We'll have him on the podcast.
JT totally could. And we should ask him. But I feel similarly about the church sometimes, especially having been in conversations and sometimes being the Christian in a conversation where someone is like, well, when I was a teenager, I had sex before I got married and my church kicked me out and called me a slut and said all these horrible things to me. And then having to sit there and be like, yeah, but that was the church. That wasn't Jesus. And it's like, okay, well, the church is Jesus's representative. So how do we tease those two things apart? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of asking. It's like,
yeah.
Can they, from your vantage point, like, and this is a question I truly as a pastor ask myself all the time, is like, do we just need to destroy like the system and the expectations? And to the point of your thing of devotion, like, are the things we're asking people to be devoted to, or the ways we're asking them to express their devotions, so caught up in, and to use the police example, like if everything's caught up in an old system that was built on bad faith and in general, or like things that we like, what is that what the church is like? Because I love the church, and Randy Woodley and I, so this was now 2 episodes ago when we were talking about indigenous spirituality, we talked about like how American Christianity, we talked specifically about Methodism, is built as like a replica of American politics. And so it's like, it's not this deeply or inherently spiritual thing. It is kind of just like a empirical, like empire and colonial system that we said this worked here, maybe we'll put it here. So that's what I'm trying to ask, is like, maybe it just can't work and needs to be so untangled and started back from ground zero. But maybe it can work. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, as a thought experiment, I'm leaning towards no, but as like a practical, because like actually, okay, great, like burn it all down. Who's going to do that? Who's going to build it back up again? Who's going to make sure that corruption doesn't take over? All of these things. I understand it's not that simple, but I think from a purely thought experiment standpoint, yeah, it might be too corrupted, and devotion to the system may only lead to negative things.
Well, let's walk this thought experiment. Like, if we were going to rebuild from the ground up, like what are the things? Like, I think for me, like gathering together is important. Mm-hmm. I think like free labor to prop up the capitalistic church is probably not that important. I think serving those on the margins, like those are the things that I wonder. It's like, and I ask myself this all the time. It's like, what are the things? Like, the church pays my salary and health insurance. Is that required? I don't know. Someone's got to do the work, but is it worth? Like, is it worth? Does someone? I don't know. I don't know. Like, I just think like all of the things we assume we have to do or assume we have to be devoted to, like, and I don't know if this is exactly where you're going, but I'm just tying up devotion and what is asked of the church in general. And I just wonder how much of it is really required and how much of it is like the cost of doing business with the people that we said we wanted to do business with.
Yeah. Like, what would be some examples of like things you're thinking of, like what is required of the church?
Well, like we started the Well, and we're a United Methodist congregation, and part of that means that like I am open to leave, like so like that is in the Methodist world we call that polity, right? So that's part of our organizational structure. Is that, and I'll give you a little more insight. Hopefully no one's mad from my denomination that listens to this, but like we had a whole conversation, annual conference about like committing to our polity and like be a Methodist or don't be a Methodist, essentially. There was a lot more like tact and nuance in the conversation, but that was the thrust of it. And my question is always, but what if that's not the best strategy anymore, or it's not the most faithful one? And so is itinerating serving people, or is it just serving the system, like itinerating pastors? That's something I would ask. Is paying apportionments to a denomination actually helping people, or would that money be best served on a local level? Again, Methodism is designed after American politics. So that's legitimately the question that American politics is always wrestling with. And so it's like we're having some of the same conversations from a legislative perspective, like we're having conversations about legislation within the denomination about how inclusive we should be or how we should serve people, and where does theological dogma outweigh caring for people. So I guess for me, like, and this is still a little bit more amorphous, so I can like keep drilling down if you want, but like the bureaucracy of a denomination, I think, gets in the way of the agility to truly serve your people, which it would be my same critique of American government as well. So,
and American education, as someone who's worked in the public education system for a number of years.
Yeah.
A lot of things that you're saying is also reminding me of education and like how I have to perform my job in the system that has been set up. Because I'm a huge public education advocate, but I'm not going to sit here and say that the American public education system is perfect, because it's far from it, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that while you were talking, this idea, I'm thinking about like, there's this through line of devotion, but then there's also this like kind of undercurrent of like betrayal. So it's like when people who are super duper devoted to the church and to Christianity deconstruct from that, oftentimes, I mean, I definitely felt a little betrayed by the church of like, wow, like I bent over backwards for you. I did everything that you asked me to for years, for my whole life. I built my life around this religion and this place and these people, and it hurt me really bad, and in a way that is sometimes, I think, kind of irreparable. And so there's that betrayal piece of it.
Yeah.
But then I think that also happens on like kind of the other side of it too, of like, oh, someone who's so devoted leaving. Like if you were to buck against your, what is it, polity? Like if you're moved to
itinerate, like, if I like said I wasn't going to itinerate.
Yeah, like if you were like, I'm not doing that, then you're, the Methodist leadership may be like, well, that's a betrayal of what this is. That's a betrayal of this system. And so I think that, I'm just like, I don't know if I have like a conclusion to this, but it's something that I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation, that I think makes this question so difficult to answer of like, okay, should we really like tear down the modern church and how do we build it back up? Because I don't know, like, I don't know how to do that. And well, one more thing, I do think that there is value in systems, even if they're not perfect. So yeah, it can absolutely be better. And I'm always going to advocate for reform and for change. But that doesn't always look like a complete and total like gut and remodel. Sometimes it's like, sometimes it's over time changing little pieces, but it's not like burning the house to the ground and building something completely new on the plot,
Yeah, there's got to be wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And like how you go about it, like, and we're trying to do some remodeling at our house. Like we can't do it all in one stretch due to finances and like livability, right? So that's certainly true. I also think, like, I was thinking about this as you were talking, like, I think everyone is required to be devoted to something, and and required maybe too strong word, but I think everyone is devoted to something, right? Like, and some people are like, oh, I don't think I am. It's like, but I think you probably are. You're devoted to not being devoted to things. I don't know, but I think people are.
Is that possible?
I think people
just a contrarian.
Yeah, I think people have devotion to things, and I was thinking about that in terms of like the well, like. And this is an interesting, like, it's my job to make sure they know what I am devoted to, or connected to, which is the Methodist world. Yeah. So they know what they're signing up if they are expressing their devotion to this thing. And that is where I draw the tension a little bit. Because like I love Methodism. I'm not trying to like buck and change and ruin anything. But I do feel like I want to reform things that are not useful. And I think about it, I'm going to keep using American political language because I think that sometimes, though unhealthy and can feel gross, is helpful because I think we understand how American politics works more than the church sometimes. Like, I am a representative to my constituents that are the members of the well. And my job is my job to advocate for my constituents the most, or for my country or the denomination the most. And isn't that somewhat what the largest question is for our people in politics? Like, I would say my job is to advocate for my flock or my people, my constituents, whatever. And I think the denomination would say your job is to advocate for the furthering of the denomination. And I wonder what has the greater good. And again, like, I'm making everything pretty capitalistic, which is funny because that was an idea of what we thought we might talk about.
Yeah.
But
Danny, you said you didn't want to talk about capitalism.
Yeah, I know, or politics. I said both those things, and now it's like all I'm talking about. But I am going to use another capitalistic example. Lyft or Uber, I can't remember which one. I had a conversation, let's say 10 years ago, and one of them, I can't remember which it was, but one of them made an effort to be more driver focused and one more customer focused. And I think, and I just wonder, like, what do you think the job of Uber is? Like, do you think Uber should be more customer focused, or should they be more driver focused? And what's going to, you think, create better outcomes for the company and for the individuals?
I say this about not like Lyft or Uber, but especially when I was younger, I worked some like retail and food service jobs where the places that were wholly devoted to the opinions and I get like, I don't want to say needs because like it's like fast food or whatever. It's not like,
right.
Like the opinions of the customers and desires, I suppose, were really great places to patronize. Like, you could go there as a customer and have a really great experience, but they sucked to work at. And it's because they did not care about the employees. Everything that we were told to do was to make the customer happy. And I don't know if you know this about customers, but they are not like a great group of people, a super easy group of people to please. And then it led to, I think, a bunch of entitlement in like the general population of people think that people think that workers are meant to serve them, essentially. So I think that's really messed up. And I really like to patronize places that don't do that prioritize the health and well-being of their employees, because those are the people that are actually doing the work and running the company. Even if it makes it, slightly less convenient for me as a customer, I know that people that are working for this company are having a better time, and that makes me happy. So I get that like fulfillment from it. But yeah, because I don't know, like, do you have to choose? Like, do we have to choose as either members of a church or people in a company? Does it have to be one or the other?
Yeah. So that's where so Uber and Lyft had this like thing, right? I think it was Uber was more customer centric, Lyft was more driver centric. They both thought it was going to, ultimately, this is where capitalism screws everyone. They were both really only looking at the bottom line. So this is where the negative of it comes. But I think of another local business to the St. Charles area that will remain nameless, but they've continued to expand and done great things for their business. But they are notoriously bad at keeping their employees because they don't give a shit about their employees. And they don't give them health insurance, and they're just like mechanisms to like have great customers that pay their bills, and they'll just like run through people. And for whatever reason, they've been able to do this. And I know the owners, and they're generally nice people, but they only care about the bottom line. So what I think the issue is in all of it is kind of like the motivation behind it, though, to what you were saying, and like the false binary that we have to choose one or the other. Like, can't we be good to our system? And by good, do what I mean, like challenge it and prop it up where it's doing well, and then challenge it and pull it down where it's doing poorly. Can we be good for the people that are serving in that, and challenge them and support them, and then ultimately good for the people that it's serving. But I think oftentimes like we can either be good for the customer or we can be good for the employee, we can be good for the constituent or good for the representative. And it's like, I think you asked the question that is the most astute of all of those, is why do we have to choose? Like, can it be all of those? And I think economically, politically, and religiously, people would say that's naive. And I'm like, it feels like naive answers are sometimes the best answers. But I don't know. I'm an idiot sometimes. So I don't know.
No, I first of all don't think you're an idiot. Second of all, it might be a little naive, but I'm okay with that because it makes me wonder how much of this kind of like adversarial bent is human nature versus how much of it is the culture that we've been raised in. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
are we as human beings just always doomed to be adversarial to each other?
Yeah.
And build systems where it has to be one or the other? Or is that the way we do it because that's the way it's always been done?
Yeah. I don't know, man. My biggest takeaway in our conversation thus far has been that apparently I just really wanted to talk about politics. That's like the only thing. I like shoved politics into this hard, and we.
You really shoehorned it in there.
Yeah, and I'm like reflecting back. I was like, damn, I really must have wanted to talk about politics today. But
that's all right.
And then I said before we recorded that I didn't want to talk about that. That's fair.
Yeah, you're like, we're not doing that today. I don't feel like it.
Well, here's maybe we land the plane. What would be what? So I suspect we were at JT's house helping him move in the other day, which was a cluster. It was hot and it was rainy, and both at the same time, and so many boxes. But they got moved in. He texted me today. He said he was mowing his yard. But what made me think about this was like you brought this up and you felt like you had some energy behind it. And so what was the energy and what would be your hope and takeaway for someone who's listening today? Like, even if we meandered a little bit to bring it back full circle, what kind of made this an interesting topic to you, and what might be your word of encouragement to someone who is listening?
I guess I posed the question a minute ago, like, is this the way things are because it's human nature, or is it the way things are because it's the way things have always been?
Yeah.
And I feel like I believe more that we are kind of just creatures of habit, and there are a lot of cycles that can be broken, but it's not easy. And people want to, what is human nature is taking the path of least resistance. Like, we want things to be easy. And so since the path of least resistance is to keep doing what we've always done, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to break out of that. And so I would say, I guess my original point, and like, for the record, this is not kind of the direction I thought that this conversation would take, which is totally fine. But I think it does kind of tie in. Going into this, I was thinking about how devotion can sometimes lead to obsession or addiction. That kind of addiction's more like pathological, than obsession is.
Sure.
But that vibe, it can kind of lead to that if left unchecked. And so I think to be healthy, to have a healthy level of devotion, it has to be tempered with nuance, I guess, and understanding that just because a system is built one way doesn't mean that it doesn't have flaws, and doesn't mean that you should follow it blindly. And so, like, I guess that does kind of tie in to, like, just because things are one way doesn't mean that they have to stay that way forever. So I think it takes a lot of wisdom and discernment to realize when something needs to change and whether or not that's the right thing. I definitely don't always nail it in my own life, and I think large groups of people have an even harder time agreeing on when it's time to change something. But I don't think it's impossible. I think we can do it.
I think we can do it too. You know who hates nuance?
Who?
Bitches.
Bitches hate nuance. Bitches hate nuance.
Yeah. Have you heard us use this phrase a lot around the well? It's like a phrase.
I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard you say that.
It's one of our internal phrases that we use that obviously doesn't make it to the light of day very often, but
That's
it's certainly
so funny. Nuance is necessary.
The sermon series we did called Nuance was the working title was called Bitches Hate Nuance. And I worked really hard to work it into the graphic, and I was like, there's no way I can do this in a way that's not going to get me in too much trouble. So I dropped it and we just called it Nuance.
Incredible.
Well, I think nuance is the key to devotion, actually. Kind of you said it in passing. Like, devotion doesn't ask a lot of nuance because it's like devotion is it's wholesale, right? And I think I struggle with this personally in my life. I had mentioned like fitness stuff and other things that and you're right. I think there's a difference between obsession and addiction. And I think we can conflate those in unhealthy ways for both people that have obsessive desires and compulsions and addictive ones. Yeah. But I do think they overlap some on the Venn diagram, and understand that nuance and all of that. And the better you understand the motivation of that and the things that are healthy, the things that sometimes I think we attach things unnecessarily to devotion, where it's that's the unhealthy part. So stripping some of those away. And I think it requires a nuanced view of ourselves, of the organization, of where we're healthy, where we're unhealthy. Maybe a better way than nuance is it requires a level of personal and institutional self-awareness to not have devotion turn into something really negative, even in the best of desires.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point too. Yeah. Self-awareness is important. Just a funny little thing to end with. I think I saw a reel of some guy, and it was one of those fitness grind set CEO bros.
Yeah. Andy Elliott.
I don't remember who it was, but he was no, I don't really self-reflect ever. I live in the moment. I keep moving forward. And I was oh, that fucking tracks. I think self-reflection is important. It's, not just navel gazing. Sometimes we have to look inward to figure out how to move forward. So
yeah, I think the manosphere is so afraid of reflecting too long that they're let's just keep marching forward. And they would be well, it's a feminine thing. We just act, and God designed men to act and to move. And I'm all of it's so dumb. It's hard to know which part to rip apart first. But the manosphere is one of my least favorite places that exists. And what I hate, this is a whole nother stupid podcast topic that we found ourselves in, but it's I don't even know how they've gotten so much cred within the entrepreneurial world, the political world, the religious world. But it's people are listening to this stuff and acting like it's legit. And then you talk about anything of value and they're well, that's this, or that's too feminine, or that's gay, or that's what it's all of these things that are thrown out that I'm what do and that's propped up as an ideal in a framework that has value by so many people that it is flabbergasting to me. Yeah.
I think that is another podcast topic, and because I have thoughts and I would also like to talk about that.
Well, maybe not next week, but in a week to come, the manosphere will take it on.
Maggie and Danny take down the manosphere.
We'll have to. Maybe we can have a manosphere person on the episode.
No. You can have a manosphere person on the episode.
Maybe we'll just talk about it then. All right, Maggie, this was fun. I don't know if we landed anything, but we certainly had a good conversation, and we'll keep it going in the weeks to come.
Agreed.